What's up, gang? Welcome to The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mashazde. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now listen, The Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I say, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mashazde. And boy, do we have a special guest, two-time alumni. Dandapani is in the house. What's up, Dandapani?
Hey, Darius. Good to see you again. Thank you for having me back.
Man, two things. Number one, I'm so excited to have you back. And number two, the only thing I'm sad about is that we're not singing this time.
I know. I'm really disappointed. That's the only reason I came back on the show. And I hear you stop doing it. I'm like, why am I wasting my time here?
God, we got to blame Sony, because Sony, I think, slapping me with like copyright infringement. So
I'm going to play a George Michael song with Phony on there.
I know. What's our problem? How you doing, man? What's going on?
Good. Yes, very good. So happy to be back here and have another conversation.
I know, man. I love having you on the show. So audience members, it's been a minute. We did a 2-part series with Dandapani. Gosh, it was probably about 4 years ago. The show started 5 years ago. So that was the first time I think you're on. And then the second time was probably sometime right after that. So it's been a few years. I've known Dandapani now. I think, I was looking back. I think we're going on like close to 13, 14 years. It's been a while, because when did you originally? Well, I know I did a thing called Growing Happiness Conference in 2014, and I'd met you a year or so or 2 years before that. So it's been 2012, 2013 was when we met. So man, it's been quite over a decade. Like here we are.
For sure. Yeah, I know. It's really amazing when I think about it. Yeah.
It is amazing. It's like, I love like how life kind of brings people into your life, and then you just end up kind of like gravitating towards the people that you share, values with, and
others you never see again.
Yeah. Yeah. Screw those people. Oh shit, man. So for audience members, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. As I mentioned, so I've known Dandapani for over a decade. I met you briefly at TEDx Reno. And that was where you had keynoted that event. And it was like, I was like, oh my God, who's this guy? Like, I love your stuff. And then I invited you to come speak at our Growing Happiness Conference, but that got postponed for like 2 years.
Yes.
Came and spoke to my team at TMS. And then we, it's just been a friendship that's blossomed over that time. Went to see you at your property in Costa Rica a couple years ago during COVID. Yep. And then we had dinner recently in Austin. I got to sit through a great workshop that you did with EO Austin. So man, it's really great to reconnect with you and to get to spend time with you today.
Always great seeing you. Yeah.
So for the audience, maybe if you're not familiar with Dandapani's work, Dandapani, like, as I mentioned, I'm going to do kind of like your formal bio, and then maybe we can give a little bit of background since it's been a minute since you've been on the show.
Sure.
So Dandapani is a 2-time alumni of the Greatness Machine. As I mentioned, he's a Hindu priest and former Hindu monk who spent 10 years training in a monastery in Hawaii. Author of the international bestseller, The Power of Unwavering Focus, which has now been translated in 23 languages. Now, I was telling Dandapani this before the show, that I have a list of, I think, 4 books at this point. Whenever a book like makes it, where I'm like, this is a book I need to read every year of my life to remind me of like this important topic. And I could tell you what 2 of the other books are right now. So one of the book is The Almanac of Naval Ravikant by Eric Jorgensen, who is a former guest on the show. And then Ed Milet's book, The Power of One More, was the second book. So a lot of power books now that I'm thinking about it. The third one is The Power of Unwavering Focus by Dandapani. That's the third one. I'm actually, as I try to think of number 4, I can't even think about it. Like those are the books where I'm like, Darius, you have to read those books every year because they're so powerful and they make such a good difference in your life. So amazing book. If you guys have, like, I'm just going to go plug it right out of the gate. Like everyone who listens to this podcast, go buy that book. Do yourself that favor. You can send me an email and thank me later for giving you the suggestion, because that is just an amazing book and it's changed my life in ways that we'll probably talk about on the show today. But man, you're a teacher, you're a coach, you are an international best-selling speaker and author, and right now you're a guest on the show. So welcome, Dandapani. I'm so glad to have you here, and really proud to call you my friend.
Likewise, likewise. And I'm so glad to hear that the book made such an impact on you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such. I mean, it really is a great book, and I can't wait to talk about some of its teachings. But like I know that most people don't wake up when they're like 7 years old. Maybe you did actually, and they're like, I want to be a monk when I grow up. Like did that happen for you actually? By the way, and if it didn't, when did you come to the realization that I want to go into the spiritual path. I want to become a monk. I want to explore this part of my life, and then led you into the monastery.
I was born in Malaysia, and I'm just kind of placing the time frame around like 4 or 5 years old because I wasn't in kindergarten yet, I know. And there was a monk that came to my home, and he had orange robes and beads and, the markings on the forehead and everything. And my mom invited him into the house. And when I saw him, I said, that's me. That's what I want to be. And, obviously a past life thing. And ever since then, it was a quest to be a monk. But it wasn't until I would say probably 8, 9 years old that I realized it wasn't really about being a monk. It was enlightenment. That was what I was seeking. The monastic path was the most efficient way to get there. And, hence why I wanted to be a monk.
Did you have like any like heritage in your family with people that had kind of gone down that road, or any people in your family that were like priests or anything like that?
No one was ever a priest. No one was ever a monk. Everyone was far away from it as possible. And so, I've had people ask me, is it genetic? Is it, coming down from generations? No, there's no trace of it, of anything like that. I mean, there were some people in my family and my grandparents that were quite religious and spiritual, but no one that wanted to be a monk or priest. It wasn't until later, about 8, 9 years old, that I realized it was enlightenment I was seeking, and the monastic path was the most efficient way to get there. Now, I obviously articulate it all so much better now, many decades later. Obviously at 9 years old, I never had the words for it, wasn't able to articulate it, but, I had enough pieces to put it together to know where I wanted to go with my life.
So would you say that there was like a deep knowing or something like that, where you're like, oh, this is like, because that seems like an unusual thing for a child to recognize.
Yeah, there definitely was a deep knowing. I mean, there's really two schools of thoughts, Darius. If you take it in a very simplified approach philosophically, there's the Abrahamic religions that believe in one life. You're born, you live, you die, and then the Eastern religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism that believe in reincarnation. So the one life theory, it's kind of hard to come up with a concept of like, how would this kid know so early this is what he wanted to do? But if you believed in the concept of reincarnation, where you're a soul living in a body, you reincarnate over many lives. So imagine if the last few lives I was a monk or a priest, and then I died and I was born again, I'd go like, I know how to do this. And as soon as I see a monk, I go like, oh yeah, these are my peeps, like that's where I want to be. So people would often look at it and go, not understanding this, would think, oh wow, how would he have this deep knowing? It's like, well, I've done this for so long. It's like some people with entrepreneurship, they just pick it up and they just know how to do it. It's not, there's a little bit of a grind for them, but they just do it really, really well. And then others struggle with entrepreneurship. Same with sports or music. Some people can pick up an instrument when they're 4 years old or 5 years old and start playing it. And I'm 51 and I can't play anything.
Right.
So, obviously that was not an area of focus over many lives. And I think one of the important things that we can do for ourselves is that if we were able to reflect deeply and focus and turn our gaze inward and really look at ourselves in a very deeply introspective way, we could see what have we been doing over many lives and what's the trajectory we've been on. And if we could understand that trajectory, we could align ourselves with that and use that force or power that we've been cultivating over many lives rather than fight it and go a different direction. Now, if I tried to do something else, probably could do it okay, but I can just do monk stuff really well. This thing, because it's not because I'm special. It's just what I've been doing for many centuries probably, and it's just easier for me. It's just what I know.
Do you have so I like first of all, I'm a pretty big believer in like what we're talking about here, which is like our soul goes from life to life, and maybe people who are listening to this don't believe in that, but I'm like, I don't know, man. Like I've had visions of former lives and like that I can't explain, and from the time I was very young, And so I'll tell you one right now, which is going to sound weird when I say it. I don't know if I've ever said this in public, but I'm gonna give you a little bit of it right now. So my name, and I think like names mean a lot, but both my first and my last name have a lot of significance.
Okay.
Historically, at least.
Yeah.
So my first name is Darius, which is the anglicized version of the name Dariush, which is the name of the great Persian emperor. So there was a Persian emperor named Darius the Great, and he ran he was basically the emperor of the Persian Empire, and ruled the world for a time period. So that's my first name. My last name is Mirshahzadeh. I didn't know this, by the way. I just was curious because I grew up in the state. My dad's Persian. My dad passed away when I was 22 years old. He never told me this. I don't speak Farsi. I never spoke Farsi. I don't have a lot of contact with my Persian relatives. So there was no one to be like, hey, just so you know, like your last name is really an important name.
Yeah.
And so one day, I don't even know what it was. I think I just was curious. I'm like, I wonder what I know that last names were I did know this. My grandfather took my grandmother's last name, which is in a patriarchal society is weird, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And I had heard that he took it because it had a better meaning than his last name. And last names were like a modern technology in Iran, around the turn of the last century. And my grandfather was born in the 1890s. And my dad was the youngest of 5, born in 1939. Anyway, so I was like, why would a guy? And by the way, my grandfather was an entrepreneur. Okay?
Yeah.
So a really hardcore successful entrepreneur. So I was like, okay, here's this guy who's an entrepreneur. He's this really powerful guy, and he takes his new bride's last name. It's got to be really valuable, right? For you to do that. So I was like, I wonder what it means. So I went and I started researching the components of my last name. Now my last name is Mirshahzadeh, and this is a long-winded. I don't mean to make the show about me, but I'm wanted to make a point after what you just said. Shah means king, right? I knew that, and I was like, okay, I guess it's because the word king is in my last name. But I went and looked up, well, what does Zadeh mean and Mir mean? And what it translates to is Mir is royal, Shah is king, and Zadeh is descendant of. So, so my last name means descendant of the royal king. I'm named after one of the most famous kings in the Persian Empire. And so but I remember being 5 years old and being like, oh, I had king visions, right? And I'm like, oh, I just, for whatever reason. And I've always felt this calling to right injustices. And I'm telling you from the time I was a little child. And so I'm like, I don't know what that means. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But for me, that's translated into being a leader, always came naturally to me, taking charge. I don't have to think about that. That is not a decision. It's oh, that's just what of course I'm going to take charge. That makes sense, you know? So I just came to the conclusion.
Like you did at dinner.
Yeah.
Which everybody appreciated.
Yeah. It's a really good example, right? Hey, someone's got to order. I'm like, oh, I got this. Oh man. So we were saying, yeah, like I did at dinner, right? That's a micro example of me leading, right? And so I'd be curious, based off your own traditions and your beliefs in Hinduism, is what I'm saying, is that outlandish for me to be hey, I think I'm descended from royalty. I think I have this king lineage, because that is what I think. And I've had visions of it since I was a really small kid. I don't like admitting that because it sounds pompous or arrogant or something like that, but it is true. It's my truth, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. I agree and believe in that. There's two schools of thought, there's the one life concept with the Abrahamic religions, and then the Eastern religions having the reincarnation concept. Now, there's not one is right and one is wrong. They're just different, and they're distinctly different. Now, if you subscribe to the reincarnation concept, all the people that are living on Earth today, 2025, on this day in October, will die someday, which means they're going to reincarnate. And if they're going to reincarnate, then they're going to come back onto this planet at some point. So if you think a royalty that might have died 50 years ago, 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago will reincarnate, again, they may not be the same emperor or queen or whatever it is, but they will come back and they'll keep reincarnating. So it's fair to think that, every one of us could be a descendant of something, whether it's an artist or royalty or military or whatever it may be, entrepreneurship, or just even a laborer or whatever. We all reincarnate. So some come through a particular line and they carry those tendencies and qualities of that particular life that they have lived very intensely.
What is there any and this is more just out of curiosity, just because after I started, like when you came and spoke to my company a few years ago,
Yeah.
I found myself naturally drawn to a lot of the things you were saying. And I don't think maybe I mentioned this on the previous show. Like you had talked about that, like one of your quotes, I think came from your guru was, where your attention goes, your energy flows.
Yeah.
Right. And so I left that meeting and was like, I just felt like drawn to a lot of these teachings that you were teaching that seemed like they were based in the traditions of Hinduism. And so I went home and literally emptied my closet of all this extra stuff. And I was like, oh my God, this feels so great. Like, so I've had this like attraction to a lot of the beliefs that at least I've learned from listening to you, or like the teachings from you. And so is there anything in the Hindu tradition regarding like remembering your past lives? Is there anything around that?
Yeah, there's definitely are a few things. One of the things I would say, it's easier to see it in kids, right? If you imagine if you had a 6-year-old kid and you divided the kid into 3 parts. One part of the kid is made up from everything that you might have been sharing and they've learned from you. Another 1/3 could have been from your wife or your husband. And then the other 1/3, you just go, that's who he is or who she is. And they've brought it from a past life and they've brought it with them. So when you look at that, you can go, if you're observant enough, you can really see what are the tendencies that they didn't learn from their parents, from me or my wife. What is my daughter brought into this life? And what are those things that I can cultivate? And it's really about pattern recognition. Some people will, like I showed a lot of inclination toward spirituality since I was young. Had zero interest in the periodic table, which my dad wanted me to learn, zero. But really deeply interested in spirituality and religious stuff around Hinduism. So that would be a flag telling you right away, well, that was obviously what he's doing. And now if you could nurture that person down that path, you probably align them with what they've been doing over past lives, and they would gain greater traction and be able to move forward at much quicker pace than they normally would. So to specifically answer your question is, if you looked at your life, ask yourself, what are the things that you learned in this life, either through your parents, yourself, and what are the qualities that you brought into this life that you didn't even nurture in this life, but you had it with you when you came? Those are the first things that will give an indication of what some of your past lives were. Whether these are positive or not positive, it doesn't matter. We all bring something from our previous life. If we could just be observant enough to identify, it'll tell us right away the quickest thing, very quick way to tell what some of our past lives are.
I love that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that a lot, and I was just curious. So I want to go to the book because I read the book since we've seen each other, and you don't know this, but this year's not been a good year for me on this. It's actually been kind of a bad year and a half. But in 22 or I guess it was 24 and 23, I got into this book listening to a lot of books, and so I listened to 35 books in 20. I guess it was 22, and then I listened to 52 books in 23. And so, and your book was one of the books, I believe it was in the beginning part of 23 is when I listened to it. And obviously I listened to it again in 24. This year's been a bad year. I gotta go, I'll knock it out before the end of the year. But yeah, I want to, like the book was, man, I love your book. And you talk about the topic of focus and mindfulness, but for listeners who are not familiar with your teachings or your book, maybe let's talk a little bit about the book. You wrote the book, it came out. What's it about? Who's it for? I'd love to give kind of some context there.
So the book really, in its essence, it's really about understanding our mind, how our mind works, and how can we learn to focus our mind. I always say the mind is the most powerful tool that we have, but yet there's no manual for the mind. We don't learn anything about it in school. Our parents don't teach us, which they can't if no one's ever taught them how the mind works. but yet everything else in life comes with a manual, with an instruction guide. So the first part of the book, chapters 3 to 5, is really dedicated to understanding some fundamental key concepts about the mind. And the biggest one, well, let me step back. Who is it for? It's really for anyone. It's for every single human being on this planet, because we all have a mind. And why would you not teach someone how to use their mind? The same way like we all have a body, why won't we learn about our body and how it works and how we can, create a healthier body? So the book really is the essence about that. But chapters 3 to 5 of the book goes into the fundamental concept of understanding the mind, which is really two things. One is there's the mind and then there's awareness. And I tell people that we are pure awareness moving within the mind. We're not the mind. So often you hear people say, I have a monkey mind. My mind jumps all over the place. And I say, that's incorrect. The mind doesn't move. It's awareness moving within the mind. And the simple analogy I give, which people resonate with, is imagine the mind as a giant mansion with 100 rooms. And every room represents a different area of the mind. So one room is anger, one room is happiness, one room is jealousy, photography, technology, whatever. And I am pure awareness. I walk into the mansion. I walk up the stairs. If I go into the angry room, I experience being angry. Am I angry? No, I'm in an area of the mind, experience anger. I can come out of the room, walk down the hallway, walk into the happy room and experience being happy. I was in anger, but now I'm in happiness. So what does that teach you? It teaches you that you're not the mind, rather your awareness moving within the mind. And wherever you go within the mind, you experience that area of the mind. So what's the takeaway? The takeaway is that awareness and the mind are distinctly separate things. The mind doesn't move. Its awareness moves within the mind. Like I came to Austin, I went to the workshop with Yo, I had dinner with you. Wherever I went in Austin, I had that particular experience of Austin. Austin didn't move. I moved within Austin. And so similar concept. So that's the first thing to understand. The second thing to understand is that at any given point in time, I either choose which room in the mansion I'm going into and wanting to stay, or I allow my environment, which is the people and things around me, to dictate which room I go into. So for example, if you said to me, hey, Dandapani, I think your beads look ugly. And now I don't have enough control over myself. So now I allow you to take me into the upset area of the mind, mansion, and I go into that room and I sit there and go like, oh, Darius doesn't like my bees. He's a terrible person. I don't know why he has this stupid podcast anyway. And, I'm pouting in there for like an hour until I'm able to leave that room. So the goal is understanding awareness in the mind. The mind doesn't move. Awareness moves within the mind. And at any given point in time, you have the ability to choose where in the mind you go into, which room in the mansion you go to. And then the book goes into how to develop willpower and focus so that you can control where awareness goes within the mind. And to me, that, Darius, to be honest with you, that's the greatest thing I can teach anyone. When my daughter was born, I asked myself, what's the most important thing that I can teach her? And for me, it was this, understanding that the difference between awareness and the mind, that she's not the mind, rather she's pure awareness. And she has the choice every single moment in her life where in the mind she chooses to reside. And she can decide that. So that allows her to go into the world and handle reactions, choose how she wants to react to something, choose how she wants to act, because she can choose which room she is in. And depending on which room in the mind she is in, that's the perspective she has, right? So if I'm in the angry area of the room, angry room in the mind, I will have a perspective of being angry. If I'm in the happy area of the mind, I have the perspective of being happy, but I have a choice where in the mind I go to. And I can choose if I want somebody to take me to a room I don't want to go or not. And that's freedom.
I have a question on that, because there's a part of me that especially recently I've been dealing with, looking back at these different, events in my life that were things that were difficult and where there's a lot of anger attached to these different areas. And I mentioned earlier, like for me, I have a pretty strong core value around justice, right? So whenever I feel like there's an injustice, like right now, there, depending on what your politics are in the United States, I think there's a lot of injustice going on in the United States, and I notice it's rubbing me like the wrong way. Like it's so loud that I'm like, this is not okay, and that's that part of me that gets triggered by injustice. That I think is an old trait, and so I've been kind of wrestling with. Yeah, I don't. Well, I know that being angry is not. I guess. Well, maybe I'm judging myself, but I'm like, this doesn't feel healthy, right? And then there's a part of me that's like, well, maybe I need to use this to feel to kind of be productive. Do you have any, and maybe I'm just and I am kind of, there's a bit of like equanimity where I'm like kind of watching this as witnessing it, right? I'm not all in. I'll catch myself being all in at moments, but one of the answers I came to was like, well, is it bad to want to use anger as a
Absolutely.
fuel?
Yes. And yes. And sports teams do this all the time, right? They use rage to go out there and play. Anything you work on becomes stronger, any muscle in your mind. It's like if I go to the gym. Imagine if I went to the gym, and I'm not a gym junkie, and I just worked on my right bicep every day in the gym lifting weights. How big is my right bicep going to be? Really huge. And my left bicep, not going to be big at all. If I am working the anger muscle in my mind all the time, that anger muscle is going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. Now, coaches say, go out there and crush them. Let's get angry. We're going to kill them. We're going to eat them. Yeah, so the player goes out there, and they're angry and they want to do this. And then they're playing the game. And halfway through the game, the opponent says something to the person, whispers something, could be a racist comment or whatever it is. And where's this person? He's living now in the angry area of the mind. How do you think he's going to respond to that comment? He's going to turn around and punch him, push him, and then get sent off the field or sent off the court. Because, well, you're residing in anger. Anger should never be used. You want to develop willpower, the strength of like, okay, I'm going to channel this energy into my will and I'm going to direct it towards this project or towards this game. But whatever you nurture is going to grow. If you're nurturing anger and using anger as a force to do things, then how do you think you're going to respond? That anger muscle is going to be so strong that when something comes up, that's your default reaction. And you don't want anger as a response. Because anger, my guru defined it as temporary insanity. You're not thinking, in people calls, he lost his shit, There's no reason in that, That's why they say he lost his shit, because he wasn't thinking reasonably. So it's not something you want to cultivate. And when I have a pleasure working, with some amazing athletes, and I tell them one of the first things, don't use anger. Because when you're playing at the highest level, whether it's soccer, whatever it is, that's one of the things players do to throw other players off are the verbal slurs and comments during the game. Someone is exhausted. We know we're all tired. How am I going to throw you off? I'll just say something, whisper something to you as I walk past, about your mother, about your race or your skin color, something, right? No one's going to hear this. You know that, right? And if that person can't control their awareness now goes to the angry area of the mind, because that's what they've been riling up the whole game. I'm going to be angry. They turn around, they snap, they hit out at you, and then you fall down and you hole yourself, and the referee comes and gives you a red card, and now you're off the field.
Right.
So you don't want to be in the anger area of the mind. And going back to what you were saying, if I may say this, you talked about, America's going through a very difficult time right now, I would say, and I think objectively it's a fair statement to say. If we go back to the early conversation of reincarnation, now I'm not a believer in owning slaves. I just don't think that's the right thing to do. But America had a history of slave owners, right? That believed that it was okay to have people as slaves. It was okay. And not only America, a lot of countries around the world so I'm not just pinpointing America, just talking about America right now. A lot of people had slave owners and stuff and believed to have slaves, to kill slaves, to torture them, mistreat them. So if you believe in the concept of reincarnation, these slave owners, when they die, are going to reincarnate again. Well, they're all of a sudden going to reincarnate as people that are all embracing, all loving? No. They're still going to be slave owners.
Wow.
Right? So what are they going to do now? No, they don't have slaves, so they can't have slaves because there are laws against having slaves. So they need to find some other ways to express their way of thinking. Why would it be any different? But now they've reincarnated maybe 100 years later or 150 years later. They go like, holy shit, we can't have slaves anymore? The laws have changed? Shit. So what am I going to do? How am I going to express my slave owner mentality or the way of thinking. So now I have to find other ways of doing it.
Wow, I never thought about that. But so if you have, especially if if the world came, because I was actually in Tanzania over the summer. My family and I went to Africa, and we went to Zanzibar, which was where a massive amount of the slave trade happened. And for any, I mean, it's gnarly. You go there and like this, they're like, there's a whole museum of like the slave trade, and you go watch it, and it's like it blew my mind, right? And so you think that okay, that was from like 200 years ago, 300 years ago, right? This was a massive part of how the world economy was built, right? And everyone in power, for the most part, had slaves. It was interesting enough, Christianity was the movement that what started abolitionism, right? They're like, this is not okay to treat humans as animals, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I never thought about that. Okay, well, when I come back, it's like, well, shit, like we should have I'm a supreme being. Like we should, my race is supreme. Like I'm going to start to build laws for that. And I'm going to use the current systems that I have to like push an agenda that I felt maybe like down to my bones is not right the way it is today. That's interesting. Yeah. I never thought about that.
With the reincarnation, that would be the concept, right? Is that's how you thought for your whole life, and you lived up to 80 years old or 90 years old, just say, for example, as a slave owner. And then, you died and reincarnated. Why would you think any different?
Wow. And then I guess inversely, if I grew from a group of people that were historically the enslaved, then that would carry on into this life, right?
Absolutely. Yes. You'd go like, it's okay to be ruled or to be dominated or to be told what to do and have no rights. If that's what you experienced for, 50, 60, 70 years, and that's your way of thinking, and then you died and you reincarnated, you'd carry that. You'd carry all the trauma from, what you went through into this life.
Wow.
It just it makes more sense for why certain things are a certain way. And I think the biggest thing, it's also a prediction of what's going to come next, because with reincarnation, all the people that lived a certain way, that whether they're good or not so good are going to come back, and they're just going to repeat that way of living. The Nazis, they're going to come back. Why wouldn't they come back? I mean, if you believe in one life, then okay, they're not coming back. But if you believe in reincarnation, like a lot of the Eastern religions do, then all the Nazis are going to come back. And when they're going to come back, they're going to go like, what the hell? This is not what we signed up for. So we're going to figure out a way how to bring it back to the old ways, because this is what we know.
That's fascinating. I'd love like to go back to the conversation around anger, because because what I found was anger for me, at least, and I'm a person that, like, if at my worst, I'm an angry person. Like that. I don't know if you've done like human design. So I have you ever heard of the tool quantum human design? It's like it's like Strength Finder meets like Kabbalah meets like it's this kind of astrology. It talks about the chakras. It's kind of this cool tool, but anyway, like we just interviewed an expert on it on the show, and I've done that. It's a cool assessment. I'll send it to you to check out. But anyway, one of my one part of my human design is anger. So this is why I'm bringing it up. Is in the past, I found that I had a relationship with anger where it was like, I felt like a kinship, where I'm like, oh, I know what's going to happen if someone messes with me, I'm going to fuck them up. It was just like a thing. I just kind of knew, like, my buddy's hanging out. He like and I'm a pretty chill person. Like, me like pretty well.
Yeah,
I'm a really chill person until I'm not. And then it's like it's a 10 out of 10. Like, I'll fuck you up. And so like, I was talking about this at my forum a couple weeks ago, and they said, well, maybe you've outgrown that relationship, And so I've now been like, I hadn't thought about it. I'm like, maybe it's not serving me anymore, but it's maybe that relationship's that dated now. Maybe I need to like start looking for a different like pattern or different fuel source to create within. Like when you start thinking about it with your traditions and with your beliefs, how does someone maybe, and I think a lot of listeners can relate to this, like warrior mentality, go out there, kick ass, doing, letting anger be your fuel, as you're talking about these like professional athletes. If you're not going to, if you have this relationship and used to that, but you want to like shift that focus into something that maybe isn't, to your point, temporary insanity or some underlying low level insanity to create. How do you view that? Like, what is a better way of approaching that?
I would say, let's start by defining emotion. I define emotion as energy expressing itself. So energy is inside of me. And when energy wants to come out, it can express itself as anger or happiness or joy. Now, if you create the pathway from the front door of the mansion to the angry room in the mansion, and you walked up and down that pathway and created a groove, it's so easy to get there because that's the place you've always gone to. I would say the next step is really identifying another area of the mind that you want to nurture and constantly move awareness there. So as awareness goes to that area of the mind, that's where your energy is flowing. That's where you strengthen that area of the mind. And that's where you express that thing. So when I was growing up, I was easily angered too, and I didn't like how I felt after I got angry or when I was angry. So I worked really hard to transmute that energy that was going towards anger to another area. Because at the end of the day, it's really energy inside of you coming out, and it just knows how to come out through the anger channel. You just need to create another channel, and that channel could be something creative that you're doing, or a different emotion of gratitude, and you say, that's what I want to nurture. And then now you build that path going to gratitude in your mind that becomes so deep, like a rut, that energy just always flows out through a place of gratitude.
Do you think that
and said, my shawl looks ugly? If I had built a path to the angry area, I go like, well, screw you, man. What's that hat you got on? But if I had built a path to gratitude, I go like, hey, man, thank you so much. What color do you think would look good on me?
wow.
I'm glad you told me red's not my color. It clashes with my dot. Maybe I should get a different color. What color do you think would be good? So whatever path I built to an area of the mind that I start expressing, right? So for me, it was just really, okay, I don't like expressing my energy coming out through anger. What's another area that I want to cultivate? And then yeah.
So I have a question on this because I just recently had a situation with my kid, and I'd love like your perspective. You have a daughter, I know, and like you're a parent. So my son came home Friday, and he's been getting bullied. And I got bullied when I was a kid, and my wife like didn't, she's more of a pacifist. And I said, look, he's got to learn how to defend himself. Like it wasn't physical bullying. It was like, it was actually a couple girls like emotionally like making fun of him and being just not cool, not nice. So I'm like, my old programming kicked in. I'm like, oh no, man, fuck this. Like he needs to verbally ruin these girls. Like they need to know there's repercussions for like stepping up to him. And my wife's like, you cannot give him that advice. And I'm like, no, we're giving him that advice. And I'm like in the airport, and I'm like going to ChatGPT, and I'm like, what are some comebacks or like a freaking 12-year-old like battling verbal battle, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not joking. I was doing this, and so like I just realized I'm like, oh wow, that's old programming. That's anger programming. Like how do you think about this? Like we live in a world that can be unkind. It can be brutal. Like humans are not necessarily nice to each other, and but we also want our kids to be able to stand their ground, to feel self-confident, to not let people walk all over them. And sometimes there's tools like protecting yourself through self-defense or anger, as opposed to nonviolence, or being able to your point, like leverage other emotions. When you see a situation like this, or if you think of your own daughter, she came home and she was getting bullied, how would you approach that given like your learnings and your understandings?
Again, going back to what I was saying, first thing I would teach her, chapters 3 to 5 of my book, Understanding Awareness in the Mind. What is actually happening when someone in school says something mean to you and you react? You have given them permission to take your ball of light to an area of the mind that they want you to go to and feel a certain way. They want you to feel bad about yourself, or, sad or upset or anger. But if I can teach my daughter to control that ball of light and say, you say something mean to me, you want to take my ball of light to an area of the mind I don't want to go to. And I say, I don't have to go there. I
Mm.
can choose to be here. Here could be happiness or centeredness or peace or wherever I am. I am choosing not to go where you want to take me. And that, you know, if you're able to do that, that gives you tremendous amount of power. No matter where you are in the world, people can say anything they want to say and you are unfazed by it because you don't give them permission to move you to an area of the mind you don't want to go to. But if you get into the whole verbal battle thing, it never ends, right? Because someone's always going to come back with a better response and it could escalate into like physical altercations or whatever it may be. But if I could just control my ball of light, my awareness, and say, I'm not going to go where you want to take me, then you could stand there for 20 minutes and say all the things you want to say to me, and I'm unfazed by it.
Mm.
And that's what I worked, the last 7 years teaching my daughter about, to understand, first of all, she's not the mind, she's awareness, and she can go anywhere in the mind she wants to go. I remember when, you met my wife and stuff, and my daughter was about 4 years old. She went up to my wife one day and said, Mama, can you move your awareness out of the angry area of the mind? My wife was not impressed. I, on the other hand, was like, yes, she let it, And then there was another incident, like I think when she was 5, she was upset about something, and I went to console her, and I gave her a hug, and she, and I said, tried to talk to her and, hold her. And she said, I'm really angry. I'm in the angry area of the mind. I'm in the upset area of the mind. I'm in the upset cage. I locked the door and I threw the key away. And I was so proud of her because she realized where she was in the mind. And to be able to articulate that was a huge win. So I said, okay, I'll give her some space. And I went to play with some of her toys, knowing that, she see me playing with it, she'll want to come play. And literally a minute later, she came over smiling and wanted to play with me. And I said, what happened? Oh, she said, I left the cage. I said, good for you. And it showed me to me that she understood she was in a particular area of the mind. She wanted to stay there, which I said, fine. You're choosing to stay there. As long as you decide, that's completely okay. And now she decided, I don't want to be here anymore. And I want to go to some other area of the mind. How powerful is that? So even with your son, when these two girls say something, say, okay, where are they taking you? And why are you letting them take you to that area of the mind? And if you go over chapters 3 to 5 in my book, that would be the thing I would tell you to teach your son. When he understands that he's not the mind, rather he's awareness, and he can decide where in the mind he goes to, or someone can decide where in the mind he goes to. You've given him everything he's ever need to go through life, because no one then can dictate how he feels. He always has the choice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such good advice. Okay, so note to self, Darius, don't celebrate when he tells the girl to shut the fuck up.
Exactly. Yes.
I already did.
It feels good for a moment, but long run, probably not the best thing.
Yeah. I was like, oh man, I was in the anger part of my mind and I was celebrating it. And now I'm like, all right, I think I'm literally going to sit down. We're going to listen to your book together. So thanks for that, man. I appreciate it.
No, of course. Yeah.
What I wanted to kind of pivot a little bit. One of the things that, so a couple weeks ago you were in Austin, amazing workshop at EO Austin. It was about a 4-hour workshop. I really appreciated it. And it's like, I have this belief that God kind of sends me my angels when I need them. And so it was an angel moment for me where I got to hear something I needed to hear. And there was one thing that you talked about that you spent a lot of time actually at this workshop. And again, we have a lot of YPO and Tiger and EO listeners. If you guys get the opportunity, like whether it's a regional event or to get Dandapani to come to your chapter, I highly recommend it. It's a treat. But you talked about like figuring out like what purpose in one's life, and you gave some advice which I've been doing. I've not been super consistent, but I've been inconsistently consistent as far as doing it like once or twice a week. You said like if you don't know what your purpose is in life, or you want to get clarity on the purpose of your life, sit down for 5 minutes every day and ask yourself the question of what do I want in life. And so I started doing this, by the way, about a month ago. Great. Like right after I saw you. And it's been, and in fact, we had talked before the show about doing like about podcasting and doing solos. So my last couple solos have been me documenting to the audience this process of doing this. So you don't know that, but I've been doing this as of recent. Would you mind talking a little bit about this? Because I'm someone that's been doing it. The audience has been hearing me kind of go through my learnings, and I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, I would say the simplified way of looking at this, Darius, if you and I met at an event and we really liked each other and wanted to get to know each other, what would we have to do? We'd have to spend time with each other. Maybe go out for a glass of wine or go out for a meal, have coffee. One conversation, we're not going to know each other. But imagine if every Friday at 3 p.m. we went out for a glass of wine and we spent 2 hours talking to each other. After a year, we'd get to know each other really well. The same way, like, you might have forum mates in EO or YPO that know each other intimately because they meet once a month. There's guidelines of confidentiality and trust and the sharing. And, after 3-4 years, these people know each other so well and so intimately, right? But there's time spent getting to know each other. How much time do people actually spend getting to know themselves? We're so plugged in all the time. From the moment we wake up, we pick up the phone. People pick up the phone, they start scrolling. They're on the toilet, they're scrolling. They're in the gym, they're listening to something. When they're driving, they're listening to a podcast. We're always listening to other people telling us their thoughts, visually looking at things. We're listening to music, which then also moves your ball of light to a happy area, depending on the song, or a sad area, or a romantic area, or a jealous area, or a revenge area, depending on what the music is. But when was the last time you sat down and had a conversation with yourself? And what's the conversation? If the first time you and I met, we would ask very basic conversations. Oh, yeah, you Persian? Did you grow up, that way? You don't speak Farsi. Do you know any Farsi words? Where did your grandfather grow up? Very surface level kind of questions. And then as we got to know each other better, the questions would get deeper in sense of, what drives you? What are you passionate about? What are the things that, you wish if you could do in this world that you'd really look back and go, wow, I really, feel some deep desire in my life. But that would only come after, so many meetings with you and trust being built and security being built. So the idea with sitting with yourself and having this dialogue with yourself is to really get to know you. If not, you wouldn't. And that doesn't happen when you're walking the dog or when you're at the gym or when you're driving, because that's doing something else. And people really struggle there is to sit down by themselves and literally not do anything else, not journal, not listen to music, just be with yourself. And that's the idea. Yeah.
What do you, we were talking about this a little bit before the show, where I was talking how, like, I'm in a season of my life where I'm in between projects. I'm in the past, I was thinking about this last night, that because I've been kind of, I'm on a month 5 now, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's happened to me 2 other times, and both other times I was, I was rushing to try to like fill that void because it was uncomfortable. Boredom kicked in, a lot of boredom. And for me, I consider myself a creator, a manifester. I'm a person that likes to build stuff and create stuff, and I like to see things come to fruition. So not having a project is torture. It feels actually like, the word that I will say, which is, this is not hyperbole, feels like a bit of like death, right? Like there's like a deadness to it, where I'm like, I gotta go build, gotta create. So there is an uncomfortableness with being still. Now, this time around, I'm like, nope. Like, you have to like be like there. That's not a reason to change the environment, because I am looking for something. The question I've asked myself this time, besides what I want in my life, is how can I be most useful? And I'm not clear on the answer. So I'm like, well, until I'm clear on the answer, I'm going to sit in stillness. But why do you think it is that people, like, using myself as an example, why do you think it is that we're so uncomfortable with being still, with being by ourselves?
If you look at the mind in a simplified way, you could break the mind into a 3-story building. At the very bottom floor is the conscious mind, where we mostly function by on the phone, texting, emailing, driving, interacting. It's tied to our 5 senses in our body. And that's where most people function most of the time. When you're sitting still and regulating your breath and not doing anything and engaging, that bottom floor gets quietened down. And then the dominant floor becomes the second floor, which is the subconscious. And the subconscious is a storehouse of all past memories, habit patterns, information, not only memories from this life, but also past lives. So as soon as you start to look into that, you not only see the good things, you also see the not so good things. And that becomes extremely uncomfortable for most people. And as soon as you start to see the things about yourself that you don't want to see, what's the first reaction? Stop looking at it.
Shut it down.
Shut it down. Shut it down. I don't want to see this. So now, you know what? This whole exercise of sitting 5 minutes in the morning is kind of really not very productive. I got things to do and should really be putting my effort here. And then you find something to get busy with because it's the most uncomfortable thing. I remember someone asked me once, you lived 10 years, Dandapani, in a cloistered monastery as a celibate Hindu monk. What was the toughest thing during that period? And for me, by far, getting to know myself. When the environment was to strip everything and everyone away from your life, that you're left purely with yourself, with no escape, no phone, no snacks, no thing to indulge in to get away, and you lived in a hut, you're left with you. Now you look inside and you see all the stuff about you. And the more you look inside, the more you see. And it's extremely uncomfortable. And so, yeah.
When you were going through that process, what, and I guess this was for listeners who, and I have a lot of friends who, and many of what are like, have mindfulness practices.
Yeah.
They do, there is a, getting to know themselves. There's this quote by, was it you call Young, which is, until we make the unconscious conscious, we will, call it, it will control our lives and we will call it fate. Right. And I love that quote because like your subconscious is really like this, like a storage, to your point, of operating system that's like feeding you data and this thing that you don't even know why you're doing what you're doing necessarily until you're conscious of it. So when you were in that, obviously you spent, a decade of your life, like having gone through that process early on and coming out of it my sense is it's an ongoing process, number one, but number two, like, is there a moment where you're like, oh, I'm like either maybe uncomfortable, or maybe did you become comfortable with that silence? Did you see it as an ally? What was the learnings from your perspective?
I would say the biggest thing my guru taught me was to accept myself for who I am. And accepting doesn't mean condoning the not good parts of me, but really more acknowledging that I am a product of evolution. I am evolving over many lives. And right this moment, I am a sum total of all my lives. And I started to look at myself as a building under construction. I'm not done. There's rebar lying around, broken glass, cement, nails, wood. I'm still working on it. And no one ever goes to a construction site, Darius, and go like, what's all this shit lying around? No, they go like, well, they're still working on this. But, if you walked into Tiffany's or the Apple store and there was broken glass in the floor, they'd tape it off, get someone to come clean it up. And that's a finished product. The Apple store is a finished product. Tiffany's is a finished product. A construction site is not finished. It can be a mess. And there are parts of it that are finished and there are parts of it that are not finished. And that's how I look at myself. And when you look at yourself as that, you allow yourself to have self-empathy, self-compassion, and know that, hey, I don't know all the answers. So there's a lot of experiences in my life I did not handle well that had very poor outcomes. And there's some experiences in my life I handled really well and created really good outcomes. But that's where I am in my unfoldment and my growth. And it's okay. And I'll continue to work with this and continue to grow with this as time goes on. Now you're able to look at yourself and see all the things, the light parts and the heavier parts, and just understand that all of this makes me who I am. And that's okay. I'll just keep working on it till I get better. And that, I would say, was one of the most powerful experiences I've had in the monastery early on, because unless I can do that, it's very hard to do deep work. Because if you don't accept yourself as a sum total of where you are over many lives today, then you look at yourself and critique yourself and go, oh, I'm a horrible person. How could I have done that? How could I think this? How could I say that? I never look at myself and think that. I go like, oh, that's something I don't really like about myself. Let me work to adjust it. Obviously, that has come about over many years, many decades, maybe over many centuries. I'm not so comfortable with it. I don't really like it. So let me work to adjust it. But I'm not critiquing or attacking or beating myself down because of it.
When you talk about doing deep work, what do you mean by that?
Identifying, parts of you that you don't like or you're no longer aligned with. Maybe that was part of your past personality, but now where you are in your unfoldment, you realize I'm not so aligned with this. Now, how can I take that and massage it and change it, shape it? At the end of the day, those unwholesome patterns inside of you are nothing more than congested energy. Energy that's kind of become, it's like when you go to a riverside in a rocky river and in the middle of the river, the water is flowing really fluidly. And then along the riverbanks, you'll see water stuck between some rocks and it's been stagnant and it's become really murky. Same water, it just hasn't moved and now it's become yucky and stagnant. When energy gets yucky and stagnant in certain corners of the mind, they become not so fun. And those are patterns that we don't like. So it's a matter of going in there and working with those patterns. Like, why do I react this way to certain situations in life? I don't like how I react. So how am I going to go in there and do the deep work to change my reaction and behavior patterns? And then you need to have KPIs, right? My guru used to say, if you meditate every day for 6 months and after 6 months you're still a jerk, you're probably doing the wrong practice. There needs to be a tool to measure if you're changing. So the deep work, what is the telltale signs that the deep work's providing results? How I react and respond to situations are different. And now the way I react and respond to situations, the outcomes are things that I am more aligned with rather than less aligned with. Yeah.
I love that. So yeah, and that's actually where I was going. I'm like, how do you know when you're on the right track? And the door that was popping in my head, I'm like, oh, like alignment, like not having friction, like feeling like in flow, like in your essence. So
that's an example. Darius, going back to the example you brought up, 9 months from today, your son comes back and tells you, this girl said something to me, made me feel terrible. And how you respond is, son, where did she take your awareness to? Instead of going like, well, you go back and you tell that bitch this is what she should say. Then you go, wow, I did deep work. It really does work. Look how I responded to this. And your wife's going to go, awesome, Darius.
Yeah. She's like, no, well, it's funny. I'm like, I'm not waiting for 9 months. It's going to happen in like 9 hours. But
but we really have to measure, right? Because if we don't measure how then we don't know if we're changing or not.
Yeah.
And so for me, when I do deep work on areas of my mind that are unwholesome, that I don't really align with anymore, I need to see in the day-to-day life, am I reacting and reacting in a way that's different than how it was before?
What do you think? It's funny as you were just saying this, and I know we're running short on time, but this is my last question, and then I want to make sure the audience knows of all the different ways that they can work with you and connect with you, and then we'll go to the greatness question. So this is a big question, and maybe this is a question. So maybe you just give us a little teaser. I think we're at a stage right now, from a capitalistic standpoint, where there's where people know that there needs to be like a higher level consciousness in business. And, we have conscious capitalism. I'm a conscious capitalist.
Yeah.
Do you find that, are you seeing that organizations are starting to adopt this type of work organizationally when it comes to helping their teams understand their mind so that they can have an elevated experience of creating a better company? I know it's a random question, but I think this is super important, and I don't think enough people are asking that question or thinking of business in this way. And I'm curious what your experience has been.
The brief answer is yes. I think all leaders need to have an elevated approach, a higher consciousness in leading people in order for better outcomes across the board, personally, professionally, every area of their team's lives. You can only get to that if you have a higher state of consciousness. But someone of a lower consciousness cannot express ideals and views and opinions of a higher consciousness. There are a lot of leaders that are just not very evolved people. They're great entrepreneurs, they know how to run a business, they know how to make money, they know all those things about business, but they're just not a very mature human being. How would I define a mature human being? By how a person reacts and acts to a situation. If they can act and react in a way that creates an outcome that is uplifting for everyone, then they're a mature soul. A less mature soul will make a decision that's only benefiting for themselves. And not all leaders, just because someone's in a leadership position, doesn't mean they're a very evolved soul. There are a lot of leaders out there in the world now, in companies and politically, that are very unevolved souls. And how do you tell? Look at how they act and react to experiences around them. Their choices they make tell them where they are in their consciousness. And if they're in a low consciousness, don't expect them to make high-minded decisions, because they're incapable of doing that.
Do you think that
I deeply feel, just one last thought on this, I deeply feel that when you're picking someone to lead your company, it's not only the skills that matter, but how mature are they in their evolution? The more mature they are, the better the outcome is going to be for everyone. So I think it's a twofold thing,
What I mean, one question on that is, do you think that the what's the KPIs, but like incentive systems are misaligned with like the long term? I think that like are you friend with Rand Stagen? Do you know Rand?
Love Rand, good friend of mine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I figured. I'm like, you must know Rand. Like, Rand's a good friend of mine too. And so, like, I think that there is, I don't know why, there's a reason I brought Rand up, but, I think that the incentive systems that are out there as a whole, long-termism, because he's a big, he talks about long-termism. So I do think that the short-term incentive systems don't necessarily support like doing some of the long-term work that you need for long-term outcomes. Do you think that there's a misalignment around, at least from a business perspective, or maybe even politically, or in all organizations, around long-term, like people not having a long-term perspective and incentive systems that support that, versus the type of work you're talking about that do create those long-term outcomes, and people really kind of managing to like these more like autocratic, authoritarian like behaviors that are lower, resonating and create short-term outcomes. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that, Rand's a really close friend, and one of the things we, definitely align on very closely is a long-term vision. I believe in creating a 50-year plan personally. And that's something, we talked about at the EO Austin event, as you can see, as you attended, we talked a lot about the 50-year plan. And then, for our project in Costa Rica, we also talked about, we planned about having a 300-year plan, so what happens beyond us? And I think when you have a longer term vision and you can push that horizon further out, you make very, very different decisions. You make decisions that impact people in a very different way than if you were thinking just really, really short term. But lower consciousness people, less mature beings, don't think long term. They think short term. What's my personal gain today? Whereas more evolved, more mature beings always think long term and for the benefit as many people as possible. And that's always a telltale sign of, how mature a soul is or a person is.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
I knew we'd run to the end here. So I'm like, oh, but yeah, we'll get off and we'll schedule our next call. I'm like, we're gonna run to the last second here. All right, Dandapani, let's do. I know there's plenty of ways people can like connect with you. Why don't we run through all those different ways? Obviously, they got to go get the book, The Power of Unwavering Focus. But where can people get the book, learn more about you and your work, and then I will do the greatness question.
Yeah. So I would say the book, anywhere books are sold, I suppose Amazon, Barnes & Noble, there's, the printed version. The book is out in 23 languages. So, if there's a language that resonates, hopefully it's in that print. Then Kindle and audiobook as well. The only thing I would say, Darius, if you're listening to audiobook, the book is about focus. So don't be doing something else while listening to book on focus, which most people do, defeats the purpose. Sit by a fireplace with a glass of wine and listen to the audiobook on focus. And then I would say the other place is my website. It's, I have an app, I have courses. If you're an entrepreneur, or C-suite executive, and want to dive deeper into spirituality and life's purpose, once a year I do a retreat. My next retreat is in March next year to South India. It's a small group, usually 15, 20 people from around the world. It's for 9 days, and we do a deep dive into who we are and what our life is about. So if you want to do some deep work with me, that's a great opportunity to come on.
Where if people want to learn more about that, where would they go to find the information?
Yeah, you can go to dandapani.org and you'll see a link there to the retreat. And that's my website, and you can find out more about the retreat. Or send an email to info@dandapani.org, which is my website. Yeah.
Awesome. So guys, we'll put all that in the show notes, and having spent a lot of time with Dandapani, like that's exciting. I was like, oh, I want to go to that. So maybe I'll go. Yeah. I was like, hopefully that doesn't like interfere with spring break or something there. Yeah. So let's do a greatness question. I'll get you out of here. Does that work?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Dandapani, what is the number one barrier to creating greatness that you overcome in your life, and how did you overcome it?
I would say the number one barrier for me personally is accepting myself for who I am. And how did I overcome it? By my guru teaching me how the mind works, then teaching me how to focus so I can remain in a state of self-reflection long enough to look inside myself and see the whole spectrum of me, from the really not so good sides of me to the really beautiful sides of me, and understand that all of this makes me who I am. And when I can be at peace with it, I can acknowledge they exist. I don't have to accept them. There's some things that I need to change. But when I can be at peace with these things, it allows me to go forward, and I'm not holding myself back, beating myself up for things that I'm unhappy about myself. Now, when I discover something about myself that I don't like, I go like, oh, that's good to know. Now it's something I need to work with, but I'm not upset with myself about it. I'm not angry with myself. I don't look at myself as a horrible person. No, it's just something that was developed over many decades, centuries, and now I just need to tweak it. And that allows me to move forward in a much lighter way, in a much more loving way. And when I can accept myself for who I am, I can accept others for who they are. And they are also buildings under construction, and they are where they are today, the good things and the not so good things. And I can have compassion and empathy for them, born out of understanding that we're all growing and evolving.
Love that, man. Dandapani, so much gratitude having you here today, my friend.
Always.
I really love
Thank
this.
you.
Appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Yes.
Yeah. We're mutual fan society over here. You guys, please go ahead, share this. As leaders, we're givers. Share this with everyone who's here. Get the book. Check out Dandapani's site. And until next time, peace out, everybody. We love you.
Thank you.
She's my lover.
You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on, so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers, and after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.